in terms of today's episode, that we're obviously going to take a focus on Mali, because you've written, I think it's 3 or 4 pieces at least that I've read, about Mali's sort of search for supremacy in African football, and how they may be able to qualify for the 2022 World Cup for the first time in their history. And I think what we're going to do today is sort of go all the way back, sort of 6-7 years, to see sort of the building blocks that have been in place, to sort of facilitate that, to get them to this position where, there are Malian players in the Premier League, in leagues all across Europe, which is, I think, one of the things that I'd really like to discuss. But just beginning, you've done various interviews with people who are very high up in sort of the different academy structures in Mali, the Ivory Coast, and that sort of thing. There's one academy in particular that you made reference to in sort of your plan to me, and that was the JMG Academy. And I mean, I did my homework on that, did my research, but I didn't really find anything that was as in depth as sort of your piece. I mean, essentially, what is the JMG Academy? What does it do? Where is it? And how did you sort of get the insider access?
So the insider access was quite easy. We just reached out to the club via email, and we got a few phone numbers. And I guess JMG is kind of unparalleled in Africa. You don't, they're the best academy there is, and their track record shows that. It was founded by Jean-Marc Guillou, who was a French professional, and he played over 500 games of top flight football in France during the 70s and 80s. He did a bit of coaching at in the early 80s in France, but he was kind of disillusioned with the way the academy system was in France at that time. He saw that there was a lot of physical work being done, but not that many technical stuff in like the academies. And he wanted to find a place where he can sort of implement his philosophy and his ideas. And I think he saw Africa as an opportunity to find some talent who weren't being discovered, who weren't getting those opportunities. And Africa, in Europe, the structure of academies is very rigid, whereas in Africa, you didn't really have that at the time. So he also saw it as sort of a platform to establish all his ideas. And that's how he began. He went to the Ivory Coast. He started in Abidjan, and he built an academy there, and he named it the JMG Academy.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting story, of course, and very funny that insider access was simply just asking around for a few phone numbers at the club, which I suppose is the simplest way to go about it. But you mentioned that sort of going all the way back to the time when he was sort of operating in Ivory Coast. There's, I think, the vast majority of people who may have taken a keen eye on maybe the African Cup of Nations in the 2000s or early 2010s. You've got the likes of Kolo and Yaya Toure, Gervinho, Solomon Kalou, Didier Drogba. There are a lot of prestigious Ivorian players who've left their mark on European football, particularly English football. I mean, were there any of those players that had their grounding with Jean-Marc Guillou?
Absolutely. I mean, pretty much all the high-profile players, apart from Didier Drogba, started in his academy and was discovered by Jean-Marc Guillou. Yaya Toure, Kolo Toure, Gervinho, Emmanuel Aboué, Salomon Kalou. I mean, the list is incredible considering that golden generation and how many of them were learnt their trade in JMG and ASEC Mimosas, which was an Ivorian club that JMG developed close relations with.
Yeah, so I mean, having that relationship with the club set up there has obviously helped them gain a foothold in Europe. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss about Malian players, which we'll get onto shortly, was that just sort of looking around, there seemed to be Malian players absolutely everywhere. They're just scattered across European football. And I think that mirrors certainly the route that Yaya Toure took into Europe with, spells at Beveren in Belgium, Olympiakos. I think he was at Metalurg Donetsk in Ukraine. It wasn't exactly a conventional route before he eventually turned up at Barcelona and then Manchester City. There was a long road to success, so to speak. And I think, there are obviously barriers and there are obviously reservations that clubs in Europe certainly have sometimes, taking a gamble on a player from an African academy. And that's certainly something that I found to be the case when speaking to Ed Aarons, the deputy editor at Guardian Sport, who sort of specialises in African football as well. He was, he not speaking about Mali or Ivory Coast. He was referring to Senegal, and was sort of speaking about Génération Foot, that academy there. He was saying that players like Sadio Mane, Ismail Assar, getting that foothold into Europe is obviously the most difficult step. But then obviously consolidating it, finding a pathway, maybe not just getting that 1-year contract where you have a very limited time to settle in and also convince that you're good enough. It's I can imagine it's quite stressful. It's probably quite high pressure. Is there anything that prepares these players, from a JMG Academy perspective, for that step into professional football?
Absolutely. First of all, JMG have very strong links now. They've been around forever, since 1994. So they have very strong links with European clubs and their track record as well. I think definitely for JMG players, it's probably easier to get a move to Europe than for example, someone like Generation Foot. But the academy structure is very unique. So they train twice a day, which definitely prepares you for a professional environment and that's from the age of about 10. You train twice a day. They live away from home. They're only allowed to see their family and friends on the weekends. They live in sort of communal places, and they live together with the coaches. So it's a very sort of family atmosphere that you have at JMG. And one of the things that's very important about JMG is the level of coaching that the players get. I recently spoke to someone within African football who was in the Ivory Coast before JMG left, and he told me, how he's visited the facilities since JMG left, and the facilities are incredible, but the level of coaching is nowhere near the level that it was when Jean-Marc Guillou was there. And I think you can see that in the Ivorian players that are coming through now compared to the generation that JMG had. Sadly it's not the same caliber of players that are coming through the academy system in the Ivory Coast. But on the bright side, it is Mali's gain that they've set up their home base in Bamako now.
Yeah, and that's sort of us getting onto the real meat on this podcast, because Mali is sort of the rough topic, and you say there that they're obviously set up in Bamako, which is the capital city of Mali, and I think it's clear to see that the dividends of Jean-Marc Guillou's academy system is paying off for Mali. They've got a number of big internationals in major European leagues. You only need to look at the likes of Diadie Samassékou in the Bundesliga, Sékou Koïta, who's doing very well at Red Bull Salzburg, but then of course Moussa Djenepo at Southampton, Yves Bissouma at Brighton. There are some really prestigious players who already at sort of 24, 25 and even younger have attracted plenty of interest and reasonable transfer fees. Are there any particular European clubs that have links? Because going through, I saw there were quite a few Malian players at Scandinavian clubs. Scandinavia always does seem to be a good landing point for African players. Even going back to the days of John Obi Mikel coming through at Lyn Oslo. Is there a particular particular pathway that is particularly fruitful for Malian players or JMG players?
I mean, Salzburg has to be the first one. You've had Samassékou, Haidara, Kamara, or JMG players coming through, and obviously the most recent arrivals as well. And Salzburg have very strong links, but there's links in France. A couple of players, Bissouma in particular, started in Lille. At the time, Yusuf Kone and Adama Traore, not the Wolves player, but the other
Oh,
one.
the other one,
Yeah,
yeah.
they went to Lille in I think 2014, if I'm correct, or maybe 13. And then you had Salam Jidou, who went to Monaco, and right now Habib Keita is an 18-year-old. He interestingly had a trial at Salzburg with the three players who've just moved to Salzburg. He moved to Lyon last summer, and he's an exciting player as well. I think he won Player of the Tournament in the trial period that he was there. There's a called the Rambo Cup, uh, and he won the Player of the Tournament there, playing for Salzburg then. And now he's on a move to Lyon, and I'm excited to see his progress and all the three Salzburg players as well, because they have a clear pathway in Salzburg. They also have a lot of Malian players there already, not just from JMG, but Sékou Koïta and Mamadou Sangare, who's at Liefering at the moment. And when I was speaking to Mamadou Vad, who's the administrator of JMG, he was very excited about the prospect of all of them moving to Europe as well, and he's very excited about their futures.
Yeah, I feel like we always come back to Red Bull Salzburg on this podcast, and especially when we're talking about African players and sort of scouting in the far corners of perhaps the underappreciated areas, and that's simply because they are so good at it. They've managed to identify scores and scores of players. We'll probably talk about Patson Daka and Enoch Mwepu briefly towards the end of this, but before that, you'd have to say that there were very, very few Zambian players that were sort of on the world scene. But now there's been Premier League clubs linked with him. There's been Bundesliga clubs linked with Daka. There's a real changing of the times, I think, in that sense. And it's interesting you mentioned the Wambo Cup, which is by far the best cup competition I've ever heard of. But you brought it to my attention that in 2019, I believe Salzburg won that competition, and there were 7 JMG players involved. So I mean that shows that not only are they they plucking the best ones from JMG without really any competition. But they're bringing them to Salzburg, and they're helping them integrate so well that I don't know, they're still playing at a very good level. They're developing into good footballers, which just seems like it seems like a fairy tale of a pathway to into European football. And while I mean a lot of them won't end up. A lot of them in Salzburg's under-19s with FC Liefering, a lot of them won't make it to sort of the same levels as the Patson Dakas or Enoch Mwepus or Mohamed Kamaras or Sangares in the first team, but they will go on to have reasonable careers elsewhere. And I think that's an important thing. That the academy structure at JMG, it shouldn't be judged on sort of the success of its best and brightest players. It should be judged on the success of how many players it develops and then allows them to go on to have good careers. Because you look at an academy set up in the UK or France or Germany or Italy. If one particular club, one single club, like Chelsea, for example, I know that's a very jumped up example, but the number of players that from a single age group who have gone on and will go on to have sort of reasonable careers in the EFL or elsewhere in Europe, that's a reflection of how good the academy structure is, because every player is going to respond to coaching differently. Every player is going to develop differently at different stages. So I think the message that I want to impart from the JMG success is that yes, you know what, they're not perhaps producing, at least not yet, Ballon d'Or winners, but they're producing a real solid bed of talent, from effectively nothing, from their coaching and their facilities. That's the foundation, which I think is something which shouldn't stop being commended ever, essentially. But going back to Mali, and obviously JMG's setup in that country has benefited them massively. But how long have they been? How long has JMG been located in Mali since the switch from Ivory Coast?
So it's actually quite recent. It's only 2007 that the academy was established in Bamako, and I think, well, like you say, you brought up the structure, and I think the structure is very interesting and very unique. Jean-Marc Guillou has this philosophy where from the age of 10 until 14, 15, the players play with their bare foot. And he's been asked about this several times, that why that happens. And he referenced South America and the Brazilian players. And his reasoning behind it is, as a young player, you have to make the ball your best friend, and you can grasp the ball better with your feet when you don't have any boots. And his reasoning is that in Brazil, the reason why Brazil have brought so many talented players through over the years is because those players start playing on the beaches, on the streets with their bare foot, and that's a philosophy he wants to establish in JMG. Even though they can afford to buy the boots for the players have to earn their boots, and a lot of the times actually the players play against opposition who have boots, who are wearing boots, and Guillou and JMG focus very much on the technical side of the game. They like the tiki-taka style of play, and it's something like they like to model their academy system on La Masia, Barcelona, and that's a team they look up to and an academy structure that they look up to. And when you're playing barefoot against players who are wearing boots, you don't want to skill those players up. You don't want to have the close contact, the close touch. You want to get rid of the ball as quick as possible, so you have as little contact as possible. And that really encourages the players to have better distribution, and it kind of embeds them in that tiki-taka style of play. And I think that's an important foundation, and it's something that's already coming through at even international level, at senior level. I really encourage people to watch Mali's goal against Angola in their recent AFCON qualifier in 2019, where they strung together about 20, 30 odd passes before Amadou Haidara thumped the ball into the back of the net. And I think that's a great example of Jean-Marc Guillou's influence coming through.
Yeah, I was just looking at Jean-Marc Guillou's sort of background there, and it's he's clearly had a huge impact on African football. And it's interesting that I saw that he managed Beveren, which obviously was the club that sort of first gave Yaya Toure his first steps into European football, which shows that it's about the links, it's about the it's about being involved with these academy setups. So yeah, it's certainly very interesting. The point about playing barefoot, I mean, it's unconventional to a T. If you're coming into an academy and then you're being told, right, get rid of those boots. That's it. No, we're going to play against teams with boots, with just our bare feet. That is probably going to, as you say, you're not going to want to get into too many confrontations there, because you're just going to end up getting hurt. So I think through tough love, I think is probably the best way to put it. You're going to naturally develop good players technically, especially in that tiki-taka style, as you were mentioning there.